know Clever Girl Finance. Maybe you saw a post on Instagram and then you started to follow, or maybe you found her out on YouTube or LinkedIn. Yes, they do videos on LinkedIn too. And I mean, it just feels good, the vibe in this room. And so with that, I'm just going to invite Bola up because I'm really excited to get into this book. Woo! Everybody done said everything about Bola, so I have to say something too before we get started. I feel so honored. First of all, I'm Ola Ogunsanya, and that's my sister. I feel so honored that you asked me to do this with you because, and we'll get into it, this is our book. Clever Girl Finance is our baby, and I have been so blessed to watch every moment, every milestone with a text, a call, doing the happy dances, and this is only the beginning. So I hope you're ready, because where God is propelling you to, baby girl, you ain't even ready. So without much further ado, we're gonna talk about the book. And if you haven't had a chance to order it yet, it's available everywhere. You can get a book. Please do write your reviews on Amazon. So, my dear, okay, let's get into it. So much to unpack. Okay, you're scared. Don't be scared, girl. So, I just want to take a moment and just really take this in. I just really want to take this in. So one of the things that I found so interesting about choosing to prosper, first of all, your name Mojibola, it means something profound. You know, you all call her Bola. That's not her name. It's Mojibola. I woke up to meet wealth, to meet prestige, to meet grace, to meet honor. I am chosen for this. This is who I am. So I have no choice but to prosper. That is what your name embodies, babe. And I found it so interesting with the way that you brought us through your journey. You brought us through your journey from telling us about the women that preceded you, right? Your grandparents, your grandmom on your mom's side, your dad's side. We heard about your aunties, like all of the women that came before you and how each of them with their special stories have like shaped you and birthed you, and they motivated you in your life's journey. And with many people who write about the memoirs, they struggle with figuring out the scope of what they want to write about. Can you just tell us a little bit about that process? Like, how did you decide what the framing would be, and what was that process like for you?
In terms of crafting what I wanted to talk about, I felt like I wanted to give people context. It's hard to tell a story if you don't know where somebody is coming from. And I was selective about what I shared in the book because my family background is somewhat difficult, but I wanted to share the stories that I felt would be most meaningful and understandable to someone who has never heard about Clever Girl Finance, never heard about Bola, but is taking this journey, reading this book, picking it up on a bookshelf, and just trying to understand, why is this person writing this book? Why does this person care about the choice to prosperity? Why does it even matter? And I think it's important so one of these quotes talk about reflecting on where you come from. And a lot of times you don't realize why you are who you are or why you are where you are until you actually look back and see the people who came before you, who either set the stage or did not set the stage for you. So it was important for me to recognize my grandparents. One of them I never met. I just heard about her, which was my maternal grandmother. And then my paternal grandmother, I met, she was much older by the time I was born, but I got to experience who she was. And those two women, even without knowing my maternal grandmother, had a profound impact on my mother and my dad, and also who I was, because I heard about them all the time. And because of who they were, my parents are who they are, and I am who I am. So that was, that part of sharing my story was really important. And then the other aspects of what I shared in the book, because there are many things to pick from, right? And you obviously don't want to go on a tangent, because sometimes you read books and you're like, oh, what's this person talking about? It's just talking. So I just wanted to pick stories that, as a woman of color, that I know that other women like me can identify with. And even if you're not a woman of color, just having that understanding of where this woman is coming from to give you perspective about the world you live in, and understanding that it's not all black and white, and people do face their own struggles, even if they may not look like it. But also then, despite the good and despite the bad, still looking for the opportunities to take your next step to do well, regardless of where you've been to. So in terms of picking context for the book, I wanted to convey, okay, these are the stories, these are great stories, these are bad stories, this is where I'm coming from, this is who makes me me, and then now it's your turn to determine that for yourself.
Yeah, I got that. And what I love about your style of writing is, and I told you this from the first one, you do this thing where it's like, come girl, let me tell you a little something. That's your style. You draw people in a comfortable way, and you help us follow along. And this was no different. But what I especially enjoyed is how after each chapter, you reflected on the theme of each chapter, and then forced us to take a look at ourselves, because I felt like I was building my story as well as I read through each chapter. So let's talk about a few of those stories. So let's talk about, I'm going to start from where, because we built to touch a little bit about your grandparents. One of the things that stuck to me was the resilience and experience, like your grandma walking to the farm, and then going into labor, and it's like, okay, this baby's coming. Like, there was that. And then also your mom's mom, who persevered and really pushed towards like creating her own business at a time when women were not supposed to do that. So as you were, I know this was your personal story, but for you for me as a reader, I was like, wow, these are so amazing. And I think back to my own grandparents and people in my life that really inspire me in that way. But for you, writing that, what was it like for you, like doing the research, remembering, and then reliving in some cases? What was that like for you?
So it was not necessarily research, because these are stories that you hear about all the time. So my paternal grandmother, these are things that she would just say in passing about how, like, she would see like my uncle, and she'd be like, look at you, you don't even know what happened when I gave birth to you, and you're talking to me like this, that kind of. So my dad's younger brother, the story is she was on the way to the farm and she went into labor. And to give you context, the farm is, usually several miles from the village or the town, and they don't have cars. They're walking, they're carrying their cutlass, their pick, and then she goes into labor. You go to the farm with your peers, so your other wives, and she goes into labor, and there's no hospital bed there, there's no anesthesiologist, there's nothing. And so they shift to the side of the road. They have this baby, they put the baby in the basket, she puts the basket on her head, and then she continues back home. And sometimes the journey to the farm was a few days, like a 3-day journey away from home. And this is just what the reality was. And that's a story she talked about, because that's just, she would see him and be like, oh, look at you. do you know? And then my mom, my maternal grandmother, so both of these women, my maternal grandmother was much younger than my maternal grandmother. My parents have a significant age gap. But my dad's mom was born in 1902, right? So she died in 1996. And so she had a lot of different experiences to share. Like, there were hopes that she had for me, and even her own daughters, which her daughters did not have the opportunity, that she wanted to do her best to take care of her children. And her, back then the idea of the woman's place was you get married, you have children, and you take care of your children, and that's the work you do. You are not a pioneer of anything, you're not a business person. In fact, you need to ideally provide male children, because all these girls can't really make money, that kind of stuff. So for her, she wanted to work because in a polygamous family, my grandfather had 5 wives, and there are many, many children. You get to a point where it's difficult to support all these mouths to feed and all these wives. And so she's like, if I want my kids to go to school, I need to figure out how to make it work. And so she started selling petty goods. And petty goods means selling whatever she could sell. Sweets, biscuits, you save some money, you build up a bigger fund, maybe you buy, I don't know, a hamper, you save some money, maybe you buy some jewelry, you save more money, and then you start to travel around to places, marketplaces where you feel like you can sell these wares and make a profit, and then bring it back home and take care of your children, and then take whatever you have left over and invest it back into your business. So that's what both of my grandmothers did to raise their children. Otherwise, their kids would be there reliant on the grandfather. And back in those polygamous families, you have to be on good terms with your husband as one of many wives. Otherwise, you get nothing. There's always a favorite wife, right? In a polygamous family, my grandmother was the youngest wife, and she was married to a much older man. And so even if she attempted to be the favorite wife, the other wives were like, come to the back of the line. Come back here. You get back here. You just got here. Get back here. So she had to figure it out for herself. So for them, it was just finding ways to make it work for their children, so their children could have better lives than them. So my grandmother named me, that grandmother. Yeah. And I say in the book that when she named me, I imagine that she thought of all these hopes and aspirations that she had for herself, she had for her daughters, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna give it to this grandchild now because she's my future generation. And so that's why she named me Mujibola, and it means what Ola said, and probably to her who named me, it had her own personal meaning for the name she gave me as well.
Amazing. So let's talk about your mom.
She's not here, by the way.
You share in the book that she made the decision to go back to school after you were born, despite the fact that it created strains in the marriage because the timing wasn't ideal, right? You must have felt so proud when she graduated, because you shared how you went to class with her. You practically went to college with your mom.
Yes.
What was that like for you?
So my mom got married when she was 19 years. Some of you have heard this story. She got married when she was 19 years old. My dad was in his 30s, had a PhD. My mom was a high school diploma, and she was okay living her life. And then, as she starts to have her kids get into her 30s, she starts to realize that, I'm looking at friends of mine. This person is trying to get divorced. And they can't leave because they don't have money. This person's husband is abusive. This person's husband has died, and the husband's family comes in and takes over everything. And at the time, my mom had a best friend, and her best friend committed suicide because she felt like she was trapped without options. And she, I don't like to share this story because it's not my story to tell. She would have been formerly my godmother. And I remember her, but my mom carries a huge amount of guilt for this, because when she was going through what she was going through, she called my mom and she's like, hey, Emily, can you come over? I really need to talk to you. My mom is like, no, not right now. I need to take care of my kids. So she goes to a beach and she lays her blanket and she goes into the water and she doesn't come out. And it was intentional. It wasn't that she drowned or anything. This was an intentional action. And my mom, for her, this was, so seeing her friends going through these different situations and seeing this one best friend now commit suicide, she felt that if I don't take things into my own hands and create my own options, this could be me, where I feel trapped in this, whatever situation, right? You never know. So she decided that she was going back to school. And my dad was challenged by this, because as African men are raised, you're raised to take care of your family come hell or high water. That's, like you never want to hear outside from someone who's been raised well that this man is not taking care of his children, right? You don't want to people who carry that pride in their families don't ever want to hear that. And he felt challenged, like, why do you need to go back to school? Is what I'm providing for you not enough? Is, what is the issue? And then we have these 4 children. Who is going to take care of them? And so my mom was just really adamant in that moment with me as a little girl that she wanted to go to school. And so we lived in Vienna, and she started out going to this college where I would go to her college classes with her. We would both sit in the back, and she would tell me to shh. And I would sit there with her, and we would do whatever in the class. I don't know.
I remember you saying you found it so hard to keep quiet.
I just remember that it was really hard to just sit there and be quiet. And then she decided that she wanted to pursue a master's degree and come to Albany, New York. And my dad is like, no. And she's like, well, I'm going. And then she took me and left my brothers with him. Well, she initially left me, and then she came back to get me, and she went to school. And that caused a lot of conflict in their relationship. I remember a lot of arguments, a lot of, just not being happy. But my mom was like, I need to do what I have to do. So as a little girl, I didn't fully understand it, but I remember that there was an issue with mommy going to school, and then mommy comes to Albany, New York with just me, and it's because she's going to school. So seeing her graduate and knowing that she had to go through all that conflict was just like, I remember my mom's graduation like it was yesterday. She bought me a dress, I have a hat.
The picture in the book.
Like that day was like the best day of my life. My mom is graduating from college. I know when you walk across the stage and they clap, I was like, that's just, to me it was all about my mom. Yes, it's for her. So like that was just a very proud moment, knowing that she was able to accomplish that for herself. And she had to create that space, maybe a little bit by force, in order for her to give herself those options that her friend who didn't have.
I thought it was interesting when you said that was your first glimpse into what financial independence means. Because sometimes women face hard sacrifices, but it's like having that clear picture, make it an intention about, okay, this is what I want. It's beyond going to school. It was beyond going to school for her. It was more about setting herself up. So then you talk about her coming back, establishing her career, setting herself up, and all of that was worth it at the end of the day. And then we fast forward to when your family, then it was time for you to go to college. And they made the decision around sending you back to Vienna, which was interesting. You went back to the school that your mom went to.
So I went to my mom's college.
Yeah. And then during that time, you experienced some really interesting racism. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so racism exists everywhere where everybody does not look the same. And in Vienna, racism in Europe in general, especially like when you think about Central and Eastern Europe, I'm sure you guys heard the accounts of Black students in Ukraine. It's very, very reminiscent. It's very clear cut. Here, we can we can be friends at the surface level, but when it really comes down to it, I would throw you under the bus if I'm a racist. But we can be friends on a surface level. We can be cool. We can work in the same office. You can come to my barbecue. You can be my neighbor. That kind of. But in Europe, the racism is more clear cut. It's more like, you know what? We cannot be friends because you are Black. There's nothing personal. You're just Black. That's just what it is. And in a way, I appreciate that because I always knew where I stood when I lived there. I always knew who were my friends and who were not my friends. Versus here, where it's like, I'm not sure until the incident happens and they show you their true selves. They're like, okay, now I know how to manage you at work, in the office, on the interwebs. Yeah, so in Austria it was, and it's not something that, it was just something that has always been a part of my life. Like going to college, I was not shocked about racism because my parents experienced it, right? There's a story I talk about in the book where I was a baby, but I heard about it. My dad did not park his car in the driveway or garage of our house for whatever reason. He parked his car on the street. The next morning he wakes up, the car, they made an intentional effort. The car is on cinder blocks, the tires are stacked next to it, and there's a note on the car, and it says, we don't want you here. Simple, they didn't steal the tires. They steal the car. They just sent a clear and direct message. So I always knew how to move, and I was always cautious, right? Even in school, I went to school with a lot of extremely wealthy kids in Austria, like very wealthy kids who came to school in their BMWs and their Mercedes. And it's not like your basic BMW, no, and their Ferraris. Like these type of kids would come to school, and there's this black girl from Africa, and they're like, "Oh wow, how'd you get here?
You swam?
Is your daddy the king of your jungle? Do you know Kunta Kinte?"
Oh Lord, what about that one story where you were on the bus? And you, the boy had said, I think he called you the N-word or something, and you started to hit him.
Yes.
And I was like, wow. And then you reflected back on that, like, what was I thinking? Yeah, that must have been really, that must have been quite the experience for you.
Yeah, so so I was the only black girl in my college for 2 years. Then another black girl came from Uganda, and it was me and her. And on Christmas Day, we both happened to be around. I wasn't going back home for Christmas. Her family lived in Vienna, and we decided that we were going to meet somewhere in the city, and then we would go to her house because my aunt and uncle who I stayed with were away. So we meet on this is Christmas Day. Everybody's supposed to be happy on Christmas Day. You know. So we get on the train. It's called the Straßenbahn. And we're on this train, and we're happily discussing about our Christmas plans, what we're going to eat in the house. We're talking happy, and at the back, I just heard this person in the back in German, and he says, I will translate into English, he says, "What are you so happy about when you're just a couple of niggers?" And my first reflex was, it's Christmas Day, and then you're going to ruin my Christmas Day by saying this to me. And immediately I just folded up the magazine I had and I jumped to the back. I jumped to the back of the train and I started to hit this guy. But there are so many things that were wrong with this situation. Because first of all, this was a guy. This was a guy that was likely under the influence of something, alcohol, whatever. He could have overpowered me. The train was empty. There was no witnesses but me, him, and my friend. You know, and as I was hitting him, I started to come to that realization. And the train driver screeches the train to a halt. And I'm like, okay, it's time to pack a bag. Because I'm like, we're the black ones on here. He's going to throw us off the train. And so we start gathering our things. The guy is still cursing. I'm like, you know what, please, you are irrelevant right now because we need to get off this train. And the train driver comes, and we're so ready to get off the train. We're like, you know, we're going to go. We know, don't call the cops. And he takes this guy by the collar, and he throws him out onto the sidewalk. And he says, "I'm so sorry, I saw what happened." And that was surprising to me because that was very uncommon. So, but in reflection on that scenario, like I looked at the bigger picture of why I was there. Why was I in Vienna? At what cost was I there? It wasn't free for me to go to school there. It was very expensive, and it came at a significant cost to my parents and to their own livelihood and type of lifestyle they lived. And I was like, I'm fighting with an idiot on a train who is of no relevance to the grand scheme of my life. So if this guy had stabbed me, if he had beaten me up, if I had gotten onto the train guy had called the police and they had revoked my visa, then what will I say to my parents? You know, and you think back to the struggle that led you to this place that allows you to be in this position, to have this opportunity to go to school here. And I imagine my mom say, "So you were fighting on the train. I'm here working to pay your school fee, and you're fighting with a nobody on the train." So you really have to take it into perspective. In that moment, there was a lot of anger, but really, who was that guy? Nobody. He was no one. He was really nobody.